The rock art is remarkable, and it shows and tells the songlines. It carries an ancient storyline. It depicts and tells a story and history of our people.
Near Dampier, in the far northwest of Australia, is a vast outdoor art gallery. The ancient Aboriginal rock art of Murujuga is extraordinary and unique.
I'm president of the International Scientific Committee on Rock Art, and for me, this is the most important rock art site in the world. This is an art that goes back 50,000 years with extinct animals and the world's oldest depictions of the human face. Murujuga has more than 1 million rock art images, the largest number of images of any site.
Nowhere else in the world has this density, and it is just sitting there on the surface, highly visible. It is an anathema to think you could place industry within a landscape like that.
Yet incredibly, amid the rock art, governments have allowed rampant industrial development here. The oil and gas giant Woodside is at the centre of a petrochemical hub that threatens the rock art's very survival.
I'm Dr. Ken Mulvaney, I'm a resident of Dampier. I've been recording the rock art here basically on and off for 45 years. We have this animal, it's splayed out, there's the body, tail and legs going out.
Archaeologist and anthropologist Dr. Ken Mulvaney has documented different phases of the rock art over time. For decades, he's been fighting to save these ancient petroglyphs.
When I first came and here working for the West Australian Museum, we were employed to survey in front of the bulldozers that were levelling an area to make way for the Karratha gas plant at the time. Back in the late 70s, early 80s, people didn't realise or appreciate just how important, how dense this cultural landscape was in terms of its art, its archaeology, its Aboriginal importance. But 10 years, 20 years later, we knew it. I was expecting there would be no more industrial development here because we knew then just how unique and culturally important this place was.
But if Dr. Mulvaney thought the presence of the priceless ancient rock art would stop development, he was mistaken.
In the time I've been here, I've seen 5 major developments go ahead. We have some companies that insist, and Woodside is amongst them, who insist that they want this as a gas hub, the largest petrochemical development in the Southern Hemisphere, in a place that they knew was so culturally significant, and everything they do does have an impact on that cultural heritage. It's not just the footprint of that development, it's the impact, the audio impact, the flares going, the noise from the industry. But worse than that is the question of the emissions, the industrial emissions that are pouring out of these plants that are settling on the rock surfaces.
Gas burnt in the plants is creating emissions that make the rock surfaces acidic. This could eat away the natural varnish, protecting the images etched into the stone.
So for 50,000 years, the rocks have remained stable in an environment that has preserved them. But over the last 40 years, that industrial development has increased the emissions load that has altered the pH from alkaline to acidic. And by doing that, it is destroying the rock art.
At the University of WA, they've captured images of the rock art before the gas and chemical plants were built and rephotographed them today. The before and after images paint a bleak picture.
So we've digitised over 1,000 images, and what those images show is that from the 1970s to 2025 we can see a discernible fading in those surfaces, so they're getting paler.
Professor Ben Smith and fellow researchers also tested how the acid fallout affects the rock.
So we have extensive laboratory evidence that shows that the pollutants that are coming out of those woodside stacks are actively degrading the rock art surfaces. Over in Germany, in a very fancy lab in Bonn, we did sort of climate experiments where we take actual pieces of rock still in their solid state and then put them in a climate chamber where you're simulating both the pollution and simulating the rain and also simulating sun and heat. And then you speed up time so that what we can see is what happens to those rocks over a 6-year period. So we've modelled the degradation of those rocks under current pollution conditions in a lab for 6 years, and we can see radical change in those rocks.
How certain is that evidence?
So it's absolute, it's incontestable.
A welcome to country for special guests. Fiona Hall is a photographer and sculptor known for her multimedia installations. Tracy Moffat is a photo artist and filmmaker renowned worldwide.
Hi. How are you going? Good to see you.
Hi,
They're joined by traditional custodian Raylene Cooper from the group Save Our Songlines and Esther Montgomery. They're fighting further development at Murujuga.
People look at the Mona Lisa as something really incredible. This is a Mona Lisa, but it's on a natural landscape. That's the canvas. This is the beauty of it. When you look at the rock art here, it's telling our story. This is our Bible, this is our cathedral, and this is who we are. The song lines come from these stories, the rock art.
What would it mean for you and your people if the rock art was to be destroyed?
Oh, look, it's hard to put into words, it really is. It'd be like, how can I put this? It'd be like in Metro Sydney, the Sydney Opera House being blown to smithereens.
The artists spend days viewing the ancient art.
The art that people had here. We don't know. Sloping rock, the fish is pointing to the...
I think it is absolutely stunning. The petroglyphs are like treasures. They're like rivulets of gold throughout the rocks, flowing over the rocks, and then, you know, discovering this one and that one, and at first you think, no, there's nothing there, and then you look close, and there's the fish, and there's the geometric pattern, and there's the woman figure with the spear, and so on. It goes on and on. We are looking at mountains of it, and it just must be saved. I mean, the thought of this horror landscape of this industry that's going to be expanded, to think that they're going to build even more, it makes me want to cry.
I feel that the drive for creativity is a shared force across time, across cultures, across whatever age you are, and across disciplines as well.
And how do you rank the rock art in that schema?
Very, very highly. And a space like this should be able to exist for eons into the future, as is, with no intervention or destructive activity.
The great tragedy is the gas plants and the petrochemical hub that feeds on the gas don't need to be at Murujuga.
The gas is offshore along our continental shelf, 100 kilometres from here at the closest. Some of the gas they're wanting to ship in is 800 kilometres from here. Industry can go anywhere and still process those resources. They don't have to be here.
The rock art has already been damaged by industrial pollution, according to a report the WA government buried for a year. It shows rock surfaces near industry at Dampier are porous.
What that means is if you look at it under a microscope, it kind of looks like a Swiss cheese.
When it was finally released, the report exempted Woodside and blamed historic emissions from an old power station. Yet when Professor Smith read its 800 pages, he found graphs and data buried in the report that contradict that claim.
Their own figures on page 633 show that that's not the case. Their own statistics that are in the report, that Dampier power plant emitted just a quarter of the emissions that are currently being emitted by industry on Murujuga. 13,000 tonnes of nitrous oxides are being emitted at Murujuga every year. And it's those emissions that are causing the damage we're seeing, the increased porosity of those rock surfaces.
Then came the decision people feared. Without even visiting the site, Environment Minister Murray Watt approved a 50-year extension of the North West Shelf gas development for Woodside. He says there are strict conditions to protect the rock art, but they haven't been made public, and whether they're adequate remains to be seen.
50 years, it's enough time to lose a significant portion of the Murujuga rock art at current levels of pollution.
Even if Woodside can mitigate the impact of emissions on the rock art, its gas expansion is a massive carbon bomb that will unleash billions of tonnes of greenhouse gases.
Our whales, our dreaming stories, our turtles, these song lines belong to everybody.
Raylene Cooper sees a parallel between what's happening at Murujuga and Rio Tinto's destruction of Indigenous rock art at Juukan Gorge.
They promised that this would never happen again. Murujuga, more than 1 million rock art engravings that are being continually destroyed.
This is a preventable disaster that is happening. It's a Juukan Gorge in slow motion that we're watching happening, and that we could stop at any point if we had the political will to do it. It makes me very angry, but it makes me determined to carry on and make sure we do something about this.
We would not accept in Australia an oil rig placed inside the barrier reef. A petrochemical plant sat next to Uluru. But for some reason, on the far west of Australia, it's all right for industrial development to destroy cultural heritage. This is Juukan Gorge 1,000 times over, and 1,000 times over decades. It is just wrong.